I wanted to bake a pie for my family this year, but I had a hard time finding the right ingredients to use for the crust. It seemed like every recipe I found required a totally different set of ingredients. Additionally, when I tried to roll out the crust, I couldn't get it to stay together in a pan, no matter how hard I tried. What am I doing wrong?
Well, you have to use the ingredients that make the crust both tender and crumbly. You also don't want to lose the structure and elasticity of the flour.
So do all the ingredients in the crust have their own specific purpose?
Yeah, some ingredients are there as tougheners and others act as tenderizers, but you need to find a balance between those two qualities to have a good pie crust and to stop the gluten from forming.
Okay, great. Let's get started.
Flour is the main ingredient for the recipe. It holds all the other parts of the crust together. Flour contains gluten, which provides elasticity. This makes the dough easier to roll out. However, you don't want to have too much gluten because this would get rid of the tenderness that we're looking for. Because different flour types contain different amounts of gluten, it is important to know what type of flour you're using for the crust. In order to provide optimal amount of gluten, we will use all-purpose flour for our recipe.
Then we will add some salt. Salt contributes to flavor development. Too much salt could give the finished crust a salty flavor, but if you add just a small amount, it will not influence the taste of the dough.
We're also going to add a small amount of sugar to the pie crust. Sugar is helpful because it is a tenderizer, meaning it inhibits gluten formation. It also promotes Maillard browning reactions within the crust.
Next, you need some sort of fat to add texture to the crust. Butter and shortening are the two best choices to use. Butter brings with it a pleasant flavor, but it sacrifices some texture. This is because while shortening keeps its composure between 53 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, butter starts to melt at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, making it unstable at room temperature. Although shortening does not provide flavor, its added stability does produce a more tender crust and allows the fat to form layers in the crust. Since we are looking for texture over flavor, we will use shortening for our recipe. You can also use butter-flavored shortening, which provides a more buttery flavor while still giving you the structural advantages of shortening. We want to add the shortening to the mixture piece by piece in order to give the dough a more flaky texture.
While mixing the solid ingredients together, we will combine the liquid ingredients on the side. We will be using egg, vinegar, and water for this part of the recipe.
The egg contributes to the structure of the dough and makes it easier to roll out. Vinegar acts as a tenderizer. Its acidic nature helps to slow down the formation of gluten.
Water provides the liquid element for the recipe. It permits the flour to form the small amount of gluten needed. The amount of water used is important to the composition of the dough. There should only be enough water present to hold the ingredients together. Here we used 5½ tablespoons. After we have liquid ingredients, we slowly added them to the solid mixture before mixing everything together. When mixing the ingredients, it's important to remember that you don't stir the recipe too much. This is because too much mixing allows for more gluten to form, which sacrifices much of the tenderness that we want in our finished crust. At a certain point, you will notice that the dough will require kneading instead of continuing to mix.
Now that we've finished mixing the ingredients, it's time to roll out the dough. After rolling the dough into a flat circular shape, the next step is to place the dough into a pie pan. It's important to know that you cannot bake the pie crust by itself, but rather follow the baking instructions that accompany your pie filling. In this instance, we used a pumpkin pie filling.
We preheated the oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. We put the pie in at this temperature for 15 minutes and then brought it down to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and cooked it for 40 more minutes. The instructions from the pie filling suggested at this stage the pie can be baked from anywhere between 40 and 50 minutes. However, this 10-minute window is given due to many cooking and baking factors. For example, the difference between individual ovens is known to affect baking times.
After the cooking time has elapsed, our pie is now ready to eat. When checking the recipe for these pies, you may find that your crust and filling recipe makes more than one pie.
So let's stick a fork in this project. We're done.
That was easy as pie.
Not really. Well, that's awkward.